Good evening, Midge Ure.
Good evening.
Thank you very much for doing this.
No problem at all.
Well, before we talk about Live Aid, which was of course the follow-up to Band Aid 6 months earlier, how did Bob Geldof and you hook up to begin with?
It was by accident. We knew each other, obviously, from the music scene back in the late 70s. And I happened to be doing a TV show in the north of England, which Bob Geldof's girlfriend hosted. And Bob was talking to Paula on the telephone that night about the famine he had just seen on television in the UK. And I spoke to him on the phone, and he asked if I could help him do something. And that was how Band Aid was born. And of course, 6 months into the whole Band Aid project, after making the record and all of the stuff that's now history, the idea of Live Aid grew, because the money generated from Band Aid wasn't enough to do what we intended to do. So Live Aid was kind of conceived.
It wasn't enough, but it was more than you ever hoped.
Oh, absolutely. We thought that if we had a Christmas record, a Christmas number one in the UK, you can sell maybe 3-4 times as many records over that period as you can any other time that you would have a number one in the charts. So we realized that if we got a number one record over the Christmas period, we could raise, we thought, £100,000, and of course it raised an awful lot more than that.
But you had to hurry to get the song in the shops before Christmas, because it was already the end of November.
Well, yeah. Well, I remember if we wanted to have a Christmas record, yes, and that's what we'd written. We'd written a Christmas song, so we had to do it very, very quickly. I spent 4 days in my recording studio playing all the instruments, and we spent one day, the day that everyone saw on the video that everyone saw on television, with all the artists singing, Phil Collins playing his drums and things. So we didn't have much time to do it. It had to get to the pressing plants very, very quickly in order to have it pressed up in the shops by a few weeks before Christmas.
When it comes to Live Aid and Band Aid, everyone knows the name of Bob Geldof, but he once said that if you had told him no on the phone, there would never have been a Band Aid or Live Aid.
I think it's funny because I kind of forgot for a long time, and it was Bob who reminded me. I forgot that the Boomtown Rats were finished. They'd broken up. Bob was sitting at home doing not very much, whereas I was still very much working with Ultravox. So I kind of helped wield the commercial power that was needed to make this happen. And Bob had said, and he said many times, that he was very unsure of what his strength was within the industry. But of course, Bob's an incredibly powerful person. Whether you have a current hit or not, when he asks you to do something, he's so passionate about it that it leans forward and kind of grabs you. So yeah, I mean, it was a good partnership in that respect.
And then a couple of months later, Live Aid was conceived. But how do you go from a studio with a number of famous people to this event? Where do you start?
Well, you have to understand that the Band Aid Trust, the body of people that we put together to oversee the monies coming in and the distribution of the goods and monies from the Band Aid record, involved some of the key industry people. We had record company executives, we had music business managers, and we had Harvey Goldsmith, one of the major concert entrepreneurs in the UK at the time. So we had the wherewithal, we had the power within that little group of people to be able to start shaking and rattling. Mm-hmm. We also had the head of the BBC, which really helps, So when the idea, Bob walked in one day with a little drawing on a pad on a piece of paper of a globe with a knife and fork either side of it, and said, "This is something that we need to do this." And he started talking about the idea of a concert. Then it grew into 2 concerts. Then it grew into every day we were having these meetings, and he would come in and say, "I saw Freddie Mercury last night in a restaurant, and I told him he's doing Live Aid." So it was very much a a power thing. We were a well-known, powerful force at that point, and I think people were obviously much more exposed to what was going on in Ethiopia at the time. So people felt it. If artists didn't want to do it, they would say it. But it would. I think it was almost impossible for artists to say they wouldn't do it because it was so public, the mess that was going on in Africa at the time.
Yeah, and you didn't expect the success of Band Aid to be that big. Did you expect this to be as big as it was?
No, I have to say, we talked about it for 3 months prior to the concert, and it wasn't until the day of the concert that I really believed it was going to happen. The scale of it was just huge. 2 concerts either side of the Atlantic at a time when you couldn't, you had to book a telephone call to make a telephone call to America. Mobile phones didn't really exist. Everything was done by telex. It was a long, slow process. So until the day we turned up at Wembley Stadium, you didn't really kind of believe in your heart of hearts that it was going to happen. And the countdown to the start of the concert and Status Quo kicking off with Rockin' All Over the World, that was the moment that it really hit home that this was real.
And almost 30 years later, it still hits home.
Yeah, of course. And it is one of those moments that people now say, if you were old enough, where were you, on that day? And they'll be able to tell you, they'll tell you exactly what happened. So it's a not just a musical moment, it's a social moment in all our lives.
You performed as well with Ultravox?
I did, yeah.
How was it to be on that stage?
Very scary. Ultravox, back in those days, the technical stuff we used on stage was so flaky. It was such a strange thing to use, those old synthesizers, that we used to have to do a 5-hour sound check before any concert.
Oh.
So the idea of walking on stage at Live Aid, where you had no sound check, you just had to walk on and hope that everything worked, was a little scary. There's 100,000 people in the stadium watching you, but there was a potential of 2 billion people watching it on television. So you kind of hoped that it would work. But once we got on there, the whole set, the whole 18 minutes went by in a split second. It just flew by. The one outstanding thing I remember is the entire audience in the stadium all clapping their hands in time of Vienna, which was just magic.
Yes, and I read somewhere that despite not being able to sound check, you performed Vienna very well, and even at Juilliard you are applauded for that. Did you know that?
Oh no, I didn't know that at all. Oh wow, there you go.
I saw that on a clip of YouTube that even Juilliard is enthusiastic about your ability to do that high note immediately. You are still a trustee of the Band Aid Fund?
I am, yeah.
And how are things?
It's still good. It's ongoing. When we did the Band Aid Live Aid thing, we thought it was going to be a 6-month project, and it became very apparent that this was something for life. You couldn't just walk away from it. We are now like a drawdown facility at a bank. We get requests on a regular basis to fund or co-fund various projects in and around Ethiopia, and we assess the requests, and if it works and it fits within the Band Aid brief, we fund them. The nature of what Do They Know It's Christmas is, it's a Christmas record. It means that record is played every Christmas. It's on various compilations every Christmas, and the money generated from all those plays and all those sales goes directly to Africa. So that's the only stream of income we really have, but it's still a substantial amount of money. So it's still going on. In
2005, you were awarded the Order of the British Empire. Do I have to call you Sir Midge, just like Bob Geldof has become Sir Bob?
No, I'm not quite as far up the honorary list as Bob. Mine is just plain old Midge.
Speaking of Vienna, it was a hit early in the 80s. And there was one comedy song which prevented it from reaching #1 in the UK.
There was one not very serious song in front of it for a while, and then one very serious song in front of it for a while. The great British record-buying public decided to buy a comedy record, which kept Vienna off the #1 spot for a couple of weeks. A thing called "Shut Up Your Face."
Yeah, Shut Up Your Face.
And then, of course, John Lennon was shot, and Imagine went directly to #1. So we went from the ridiculous keeping us from the number one spot, to the Sublime keeping us from the number one slot. But to us, it didn't really matter. Vienna, anyone hearing Vienna was a bonus to us because it was such an unusual song. So to get it to number 2 was a major achievement.
Well, that's it.
Fabulous.
Thank you very much for your time.
It's a pleasure, Robert.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.